Imagine this. Imagine this.
This summer, CJTR partnered with the University of Regina's Center for Continuing Education to offer our Podcasting and Radio 101 Camp for Kids. It was the second time we offered the camp, and the first time we held it online. Over the 4 days of camp, a group of 11 to 14-year-olds gathered in a Zoom room where they learned all the skills they need to make their own podcast or radio show. And it was a lot of fun. Over the next hour, CJTR will present some of the audio awesomeness those kids created. Enjoy!
The army in Italy has thrown back German counterattacks.
You're listening to Radio Through the Ages.
You're listening to Radio Through the Ages.
Here's Elise with 20s tunes.
You're listening to Radio Throughout the Ages. Hi, my name is Elise and I love the arts, acting, improv, dance, and singing in particular. I love the arts. However, my true love is my cat, Misty. She's my best furry friend. When I am not with my cat, I'm usually doing schoolwork, but I'd much rather be learning lines, songs, and all the dance you do in a musical. I enjoy my voice lessons and working on choreography. In musicals, there is a lot of dance and music for all different eras. I especially like the 1920s. I really like the dance and music of the time. Historically, in North America, people were relieved that the First World War was over, and as a whole, the country did not experience much hardship at home. The people were more excited and open to more different dance and music styles. Some were the Charleston, the Lindy Hop, the Jump and Jive, and the Jitterbug. People really enjoyed the dances because they were faster and had more body contact than ever before. Towards the middle of the 20s, jazz became very popular and is still enjoyed until today. Now sit back and enjoy the sounds of our past while I play you some of my favorite songs from the 1920s. First up we have At Sundown from 1927 by Ruth E. Tinning.
Are gently fading, are slowly fading, the birds are waiting to do their mating when eventide is nigh.
And now we have If I Had You from 1929 by Rudy Valley.
I could show the world how to smile, I could be glad all of the while. I could change the gray clouds to blue if I had you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.
Here's Jillian with a blast through Cartoon Past.
Disclaimer. Some parts of the audio may be offensive to some people, and I understand that it was politically correct at the time, but isn't anymore. You have been warned. Welcome to A Blast Through Cartoon Past, where I take a look at past cartoon characters and their interesting histories from the 1920s and beyond to see how far they have come. For the sake of time, I will only be talking about 3 animation companies / series that are relevant for the time periods. Our studios are Walt Disney Animations, Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers, and Fleischer Studios. Of Bosco. He was the first ever Looney Tune character. He made his first appearance in 1929 series Bosco, the Tall Ink Kid. When Leon Schlesinger saw Bosco's test film, he signed on the creators Rudolph Ising and Hugh Harman to produce cartoons that he would then sell to Warner Brothers. Bosco starred in 38 released short films, which he sang and danced. Harman and Ising later moved to MGM Studios, bringing Bosco with them. At MGM, Bosco's design was changed. The changed design was said to be similar to Inky, another Looney Tunes character. Bosco's last appearance was in a Tiny Toon adventure called Fields of Honey. Let's move on. Here we have a wonderful interview.
What's your name, sir?
Eli.
And what's your favorite Looney Tunes cartoon character?
Bugs Bunny.
And what's your favorite Mickey Mouse and Friends character?
Goofy.
And which do you like better? Looney Tunes or Mickey Mouse?
Looney Tunes.
And what's your favorite cartoon series?
Teen Titans Go. Thank you, Eli, for that wonderful interview. If you know Disney well, then you should know about Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. After the production of Alice Comedies ended, a man named Charles Muntz wanted Disney to create a character he could sell to Universal. Disney obliged and created Oswald. Disney attended a meeting with Charles Muntz to discuss a better contract 2 years after Oswald's creation. The meeting ended with Disney quitting the Oswald series. Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising went to Muntz's boss, Carl Laemmle, and asked him to terminate Muntz and let him take control. So what happened? Carl terminated Muntz, but didn't allow Harman or Ising to take over. All right, on to our final segment, Fleischer.
Like Betty Boop can do, a saxophone can go playing all night through, but a saxophone can't, like Betty Boop can do. This little miss would never miss a chance for vocal tuning, and anytime and anywhere you can hear the sleigh crooning.
The original Superman cartoons were created by Fleischer Studios, later becoming Famous Studios. The first 9 are under Fleischer, and the last 8 are under Famous. These were heavily based on the new comics at the time, and the Fleischers wanted to turn down the project, but never got the opportunity. Why turn it down? At the time, the Fleischers had just finished their first and second full-length feature films, the film adaptation of Gulliver's Travels and Mr. Bug Goes to Town. They had a huge fear of being overworked, so they weren't looking for anything big at the time. Trying to avoid getting the job from Paramount at the time, they said that the show would be very complex and expensive to make, hoping that Paramount would reject them. But Paramount compromised to give them twice the budget they normally had in order to do the show. They couldn't get out of the deal, so the series now has 17 episodes, one of which is ranked 33rd in the top 50 animations before 1995. Thank you for listening to A Blast from Cartoon Past. And remember, that's all, folks!
You're listening to Radio Through the Ages on 91.3 FM CJTR, tuned into the community.
Here's Arden with communications during World War II.
Welcome back, our host, Arden B.
Well, hello, folks. Today I have a special and serious topic for you. World War II communications. Today I will be talking about what they are, how they use them, and comparing them to the stuff that we use now. I also have a special person that I will interview today. Stay tuned to find out who it is. Dun, dun, dun. Welcome back to Communication During World War II. Just a reminder, you're listening to 92.3 CJR. Let's get started. So, World War II communication. Some things they used was propaganda, newspapers / magazines, the radio, airplanes, telegraphs, telephones, mail, animals, and cryptology. I'm guessing you guys knew what most of those things are, but if you didn't, this is what they are. This is what I had trouble with. Cryptology is codes. They sent codes. Propaganda is like letters that came to one side of the war. So like Germany got one saying that they were winning, but actually the other one was winning. It was like something to like get them more excited and power them up. And telegraphs are little pictures that you put into these little goggles that you wear. So that's all that I had trouble with at first. So let's get to the interview. Today I have my little sister Brenna. I'm going to say hi.
Hi.
So Brenna, how are you doing today?
Very good.
Okay, so let's get to the actual interview. Number 1, what communication devices and stuff do we use now that are different from the ones that they used?
We have upgraded phones like the Apple. We have Apple TV. We have iPads. We have electronic books. We have alarm clocks. We have tablets.
Okay, so next question. Number 2, what do you think it was like for them to use the devices that they had?
I think it was very harsh, and it was sad because they couldn't connect with their loved ones in the war. And if they did connect, it would be by mail probably, and it would take like a few months to get there, so it's very sad.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Okay, number 3, what would change if we had the communication devices they had?
I think it would kind of be normal. I think it would be a lot harder because, like, if we're on a big trip, we cannot communicate. We can't really get around with those old cars and old phones. And I don't think the world would be smarter because electronics make you smarter, like homework and all that. And sometimes they make you less smarter.
So you're saying that the world could be smarter if they really tried to be?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the interview. Bye.
Bye.
So that concludes my podcast. Thank you for listening, and I hope you guys learned a lot about World War II communications. Bye-bye.
Here's Ava with life on a Saskatchewan farm in the 1950s.
Hi, I'm Ava, and today I'm going to be interviewing my grandparents Jim and Nora. We're going to be talking about what it was like to grow up on a Saskatchewan farm in the 1950s. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and where you were born.
Well, I grew up on a farm just south of Ceylon, Saskatchewan, which is quite close to the Montana border. And in those days, there wasn't a whole lot to do. I took 12 years, I rode a school bus, and the rest of the time I had a horse, and I spent my time riding.
And I grew up on a farm as well, north of Regina. It was a mixed farm, which means that we grew or raised both crops and livestock. There was always lots of work to do, so a lot of my early childhood and teenage years was spent doing chores on the farm.
And what did you do for fun with friends and family at the farm and in the city?
Well, I do remember that Ceylon had a dam where, like, in the summertime, you could go swimming there. So I would pick up my little cousin, and we would go in and have swimming lessons in the summertime. That was one thing we did. And then with family, my best recollections are at Christmas time when we go over to my aunts and uncles, and we would have the most awesome Christmases. At that time, there were so many people in the house you could hardly move, but it was the best Christmas ever.
And did you ever go into places like roller rinks or diners or drive-in theaters?
Well, no, from where I lived, because it's quite away from Regina, no, I didn't. I think probably Jim probably did more of those things than I would have done.
We, most of our time with family and friends, well, we're always with family, but with friends, were typically get-togethers on the weekend. Often Sunday afternoons, we would, depending on the season, we would, the kids in our area would get together and play softball, just a pickup softball game, or we'd play hockey or whatever. Once we were a little more mobile, had our driver's license, we would spend more time just visiting and getting together to play cards or play board games or whatever.
And did you ever go to roller rinks or diners or drive-in theaters?
But drive-in theaters were kind of the rage back then, and every once in a while we would go to a drive-in theater.
And what were the main music, fashions, and trends?
Well, Elvis Presley was very popular back then. I really liked Elvis Presley. And Pat Boone, not so much, although he was supposed to be very popular, but he was not my sort of fellow. And then there was Chubby Checkers. I do believe he was the one that Grandma Nora, by the way, was the first one in her town to do the twist with her friend at the local dances. Well, and who else? Buddy Holly was really popular then. And fashions, poodle skirts. Those are very full skirts with a little poodle on them, but I never had one, so I. And what are they called? Saddle shoes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what else?
Can you describe saddle shoes for me?
Well, I think they were like a low shoe, like an Oxford, and they had sort of a white cover or something over them.
White with blue.
Two-tone,
panels.
yeah. Two-tone shoes, yeah. Jim, what were your fashion trends?
I'm trying to think about fashions. I think probably not all that different from today. Jeans were the standard, were standard. Everybody wore really. Oh, the one that maybe was everywhere back then when I was a teenager. In cooler weather, everybody had a couch and sweater.
Ah, yes.
In terms of music, there was probably just about everything: pop, country western, jazz, easy listening.
Rock and roll was big.
Rock and roll was big. The thing that we didn't have back then that you have now is, of course, rap.
And were polka dots popular?
Polka dots. Yes, I think they were. Yep.
What were some of the big technological advancements that happened in the 50s?
Oh, we got a television. Where I live, we didn't get electricity till about 58, I think, 1958. And then we got a television about a year later. It only had, one or two channels, all black and white, no color. And it wasn't even on all day. It would start at noon and sort of shut off at 10 o'clock at night. But it was awesome. And if you had a TV, your neighbors would come from miles around and set up chairs and watch TV at your house. It was very, very awesome. And our telephone was a party line. We had 12 people on our party line. So it was hard sometimes to get a phone call in if somebody else was talking. But you know what? A lot of times we listened in on their other calls just because we wanted to know what was going on in the world. So that was, and I think we had a radio, and that was about it.
I think it was also TV for us. We got our first TV when I was 12, 1957, 1958. And it was, black and white, 3 channels, but it was a huge improvement over the radio. Our neighbors got a TV about a year before we did. Our closest neighbor was a mile away. And we would hurry with our chores on certain days when there was a country western movie that we wanted to watch, and we would walk, in most cases run, across the field to their place to watch TV. The other thing that was fairly new then was something called the transistor radio. This was a portable radio that was kind of as popular as iPads today. The reason being that a lot of cars back then did not have radios. If you had a transistor radio, you could set it on the dash and you'd have music.
Do you guys have any advice for teenagers or soon-to-be teenagers today?
Well, your world is a technological world, and you should embrace it because that's where you're going to be at. But I would say every once in a while, make sure that you turn all those things off and look out the window and look at nature and take care of your planet because it's the only one you've got, and it's pretty awesome.
I agree with Nora. The opportunities that you guys have with all the technological advances that have taken place in the last 20, 30 years are unbelievable. And that's a huge plus. By the same token, it can be a huge distraction from the things that really make life important. So take time to enjoy family and friends, do the simple things, just stop and smell the roses more often than you might otherwise think to do.
And don't believe everything you read on the internet.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Jim and Nora. I hope all you kids and adults out there learn something about living on a farm in the 50s. Thank you.
And here's Melina with 60 Songs.
I'm Melina, and you're listening to 60s Songs. I'm going to go back to 1964, when the Beatles started to take over the world. This was called Beatlemania. The Fab Four, which consisted of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, were all in their early 20s when they hit stardom. In 1964, they appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show. About 73 million were watching at home. If you went to one of their concerts, you wouldn't be able to hear anything because of the screaming girls. Originally by Burt Russell and Phil Medley, here is the Beatles with Twist and Shout. In the 60s, the Vietnam War was still going on. Canada wasn't really involved in this particular war. It lasted from 1955 to 75. Lots of Americans were against it for many reasons. One being they didn't feel the war had anything to do with America. People opposed to the war were called doves, while people supporting it were called hawks. I could explain why it was a brutal and pointless war, but that's a long conversation. Tons of good music and protest songs came out of the war, so here are two. First up is Fortunate Son by Credence Clearwater Revival, and For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield. Hippies were a big part of the peace movement during the war. They dressed in tie-dye and generally had long hair. Peace and love is what they stood for. They wanted the Vietnam War to end and the soldiers to come home. This is Janis Joplin with Piece of My Heart. In 1969, there's a giant music festival held in a farmer's field called Woodstock. It was located in small-town Woodstock, New York. Roughly 500,000 people attended. Lots of musicians performed there, so I'll name a few. Melanie, Arlo Guthrie, Joan Baez, Country Joe and the Fish, Santana, Canned Heat, The Grateful Dead, Credence Clearwater Revival, The Who, Jefferson Airplane, Joe Cocker, Janis Joplin, 10 Years After, The Band, Johnny Winter, Sly and the Family Stone, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and last but not least, Jimi Hendrix. Most of the attendees were hippies, so it was extremely peaceful. And our last song for this segment is All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan, played by Jimi Hendrix. I could talk about music all day, but sadly I'm out of time. Thank you for listening to CJTR on 91.3.
Here's Freya with horrific interviews.
Hi there. Before we get started, I would like to say that this section does have some darker undertones. If those kind of themes make you uncomfortable, I recommend turning on some nice calming music, turning this off for a while, and coming back in maybe a couple minutes or so. If you do stick around to listen, I hope you enjoy this segment of horrific interviews. Thank you for tuning in to CJTR. I'm your reporter, Susan Bellwood, and I'm here in sunny Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with one of the folks who allegedly saw the mysterious Mothman. Say, what's your name?
James Reed. I'm a volunteer firefighter.
Very nice to meet you, Mr. Reed. Now, how would you describe the events of last night?
Well, it was a sticky situation, I tells ya. Me and my friend were walking around town when we saw this large bird with big red eyes. Kinda looked like those bicycle reflectors.
Did it attack you in any way?
Not me in particular. But another friend of mine got his dog stolen by that darn thing. Well, we later did find his dog, and it wasn't in the best shape. Poor dog.
That's quite tragic. I'm deeply sorry for him, and I hope he gets well soon. Anyways, What was that? I'm deeply sorry, sir, but I think we may have to cut this short. I don't want anyone getting hurt. Well, that's it for today for Horrific Interview. I'm your reporter, Susan Bellwood.
You're listening to Radio Through the Ages on 91.3 FM CJTR, tuned into the community.
Here's Cassandra with her inter-what.
Hello, I'm Cassandra, and this is my segment called Inter-What? First up, 3 interviews and point of views from people who were around for the early internet. And after that, when the internet was made and released. Could I get you to state your name, please? Just your first name.
My name is June.
Okay. And what do you remember about the internet being released to the public in 1991?
I think people thought maybe it was scary because they didn't understand it. And a lot of people didn't think it would really be important and really wasn't going to go anywhere or do anything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So, what were some other new-ish appliances and devices that were around during that time?
Well, microwaves were fairly new. Not everybody had one like they do now. And getting so many different channels on a TV, like cable TV or whatever, was not around. So that was kind of new. Not everybody had it, and not everybody wanted it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, can you remember any of the reactions from when the internet was first released to the public?
A lot of them just didn't understand it, and they didn't even want to know. They thought it would be useless. They were used to not having it, and they were getting along fine.
How has the internet made your life easier?
Well, because I was a newspaper reporter at the time, it really made my reporting a lot easier. I didn't have to record everything on an old recorder and write everything down and write it all out. I didn't have to get my pictures developed somewhere else. I could just email my pictures right away, so I had a lot less traveling that I had to do, especially for my newspaper reporting. It was more for my job.
Okay. So, how has the internet made your life harder?
Oh, there's so much more to have to go through now and to check now. And you have to be so careful of false news or things like that. Before, you talked to the person directly, so you could tell what they were saying if it was true. On the internet, you really don't know if what they're saying or what you are reading is true. So that makes it harder. You have to be more careful what you're looking at.
Do you remember what year you got internet at your farm?
No, I don't exactly remember. But it wasn't too long after it was first released because my editor at the newspaper wanted me to get it. So the newspaper actually paid for me to get the internet at my farm because they wanted me to learn to use it so the news could be more up to date.
Well, that's actually fascinating. So, overall, do you think that the internet should have been invented? And why or why not?
I think it has been really good to connect people. Everything out there is faster and quicker. You find out things faster and quicker. You can share things more with friends and family or anybody, and you can connect with people that you couldn't really connect with before. The bad part is, again, the false news or the way things can be construed in a really weird way, and you don't know if it's true or not. So you have to be so careful what you copy and save or like or share, because if you share something that's not true, then you can be to blame for it. So finding out what is the honest answer is actually harder now than it was before.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I thank you for your time, and that will be all for today. If I could just get you to state your name, please. First name only.
Terry.
Okay, and were you excited when the internet was first introduced to you, and why?
Was I excited? I don't think there was anything called excitement because we didn't really know what it was all about, really. So, yeah, we didn't really have any information about it because here's the thing. We couldn't look it up on the internet to see if there was any information on the internet, so...
So, do you think the internet is a good thing or a bad thing, and why?
About it, yes. The good thing is it does allow people to access information that can be helpful from all over the world. And the bad thing is we may rely on that platform too much and not live life as we were before with more nature and using your imagination and stuff and figuring it out on your own.
Yeah.
So there are positives and negatives, yeah.
So, did you really care that you had internet when it was close to being released? Or did you just prefer playing outside and with your family?
Well, actually, during that time, I the internet wasn't a big thing, so I was more interested. My thing I was doing was comic books, actually. So I was into comic books. I'd have to actually physically go to the store and buy comics and physically touch them and everything. So I didn't really, the internet wasn't really a thing. So, and as far as, I usually played by myself anyway, and I read my comics, so I kind of miss that part, all that stuff, so.
What do you think the world would be like today if the internet was never actually a thing until now?
Well, we wouldn't really know what would be going on in other parts of the world, except through the old TV news. There wouldn't be all this, I think we'd still be kind of just on our own smaller community, like through churches or community centers or neighborhoods, instead of all over the world now. So I think that's what we'd be. We'd be more of a localized, smaller community rather than all this big, all over the world community. That's, I think, the main difference, I think.
So, do you think that the internet is a better way to communicate than it used to be? Or do you think that we should just still use email and all the dial phones?
I think the internet is there's a place for phoning, regular phones, and there's a place for email still. It seems more official and more real. Whereas if you post something on Facebook or some other social platform, you could get anybody to see it and take exception to what you're saying, and all of a sudden you created a controversy or something, right? Or because you don't know who they are, there could be, some of these people just have thousands and thousands of followers, and they could post something, and all of a sudden what you were trying to explain is just knocked down, and then there's pros and cons. So me personally, I am not on Facebook. I have an account, but I don't want to go on it because it creates so many rumors and stuff like that, and so I'm not on Facebook. So. And I don't mind Twitter. Twitter's okay, I guess, sometimes. I still have to be careful on Twitter. So there's a spot for email and phones for sure. I think they're probably more important if you want to still go through things through direct channels and professional ways. But other than that social networking stuff, that could be a little bit not so good. Yeah.
Okay.
In my opinion.
I thank you for your time. So if I could just get you to state your first name, please.
Earl.
Okay, and what was it like growing up with early internet?
Very early internet. So, not sure how old I would have been when the school had internet, but the school had it first. And I remember that we didn't have search engines. So, I'm not really sure how we found different websites. But I remember that the teacher had a list of websites. Actually, I think they would publish them in books back then in the beginning. So there wasn't very much stuff. And from what I remember, it was mostly educational.
Okay, so did the internet and early devices from that time impact your job choice?
For me, I suppose a little bit. I was kind of interested in computer programming, and it was pretty, not very complicated back then. So a little bit. My job, I don't really work with computers that much. I just use computers as tools.
Okay. So, did you understand when this was first introduced to you what the internet was and what it was used for?
Not really. I mean, there again, back then it wasn't very widely used by anybody. It was kind of a novelty, actually. At the time, I didn't appreciate how big a part of all our lives it was going to be.
Okay. And what would you change about the internet now that you have some more experience with it?
What would I change about today's internet?
Yes.
I would get rid of advertising. It seems like everything is full of advertising, and any service that you use, the company that runs it is using your habits and information to effectively present advertising. So I think the aspect of it has really gotten away from the more useful aspects of it, like for knowledge and things like that.
Okay. So, did the internet ever give you a bad experience?
I can't really say that it did. Not that I can remember.
Okay. Well, I once again thank you for your time. The internet was made in the 60s and released to the public on August 6th, 1991. I hope you have enjoyed my segment, Enter What?
You've been listening to Radio Through the Ages, a production of the Summer 2020 Podcasting and Radio 101 Camp. Big round of applause to our hosts, Elise, Jillian, Arden, Ava, Melina, Freya, Cassandra, and Ava. You created some amazing radio in a really short amount of time. Huge thanks also to Melissa, Jen, and Erica, and everybody else at the University of Regina's Center for Continuing Education, and to Amber and Megan at CJTR for all their help in making this camp a reality. This year's Podcasting and Radio Summer Camp is over, but that doesn't mean your chance to learn how to make radio or podcasts has passed. Imagine this is a radio playground for young people aged 9 to 15. If you want to learn how to contribute your own segments to Imagine This, please contact CJTR by email at radius@cjtr.ca. We're here to help you bring your radio ideas to life. That's all from me. Enjoy your day.
Imagine this. Imagine this.